Welcome to CASD online conference. Looks like it's been almost the 7th month of an online conference from September until now. I want to thank you for all of your support and attendance. We know that this is such a huge benefit to us, not only to listen to one another, but also to be able to interact and work together. I'm very excited to introduce our guest today. I'm Jennifer Yost Ortiz, and I am the temporary principal of the Maryland School for the Deaf. Currently, I'm on the CASD board. And I would now first like to thank RIT NTID for supporting us. We have Denise Cavan here with us today. She is from NTID, and she's going to be speaking about their STEP program and how various schools can be involved with that. So Denise, go ahead and take it away. Hello, everyone. I just want to make sure that I'm spotlighted and everyone can see me. I just want to introduce myself. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me and for the opportunity to speak for a few minutes about the opportunities we offer to you through our STEM funding from the Department of Education. Again, I'm Dr. Denise Cavan. I'm the Assistant Dean for Outreach and Placement and Special Projects at RIT/NTID. I also manage our NTID Regional STEM Center, which is NRSC, is what it's referred to, which is a collaboration with the Alabama School for the Deaf and Blind, AIDB. The purpose of NRSC is to work with 5 different audiences. Firstly, middle school and high school students. Secondly, educators, interpreters, employers, and VR members, for the purpose of exposing and supporting those areas to various STEM careers and/or providing professional development and enhancing their abilities to work in STEM fields, whether that's teaching, interpreting, hiring, etc. We do have funding available to be able to work with a variety of various deaf schools, which is why I wanted to come here and be able to present what we can offer to all of you. We are able to work with you to provide maybe a STEM day, a summer camp, presentations, seminars, workshops, a whole host of various things. For example, NTID has a summer camp called Explore Your Future, EYF. We also have Tech Boys and Tech Girls. During the year, we have a math competition you can be part of. We have various STEM days. We also have other career awareness days, digital arts. We have writing programs, and I already mentioned the math competitions. Our sister institute, AIDB, Alabama School for the Deaf and Blind, primarily serves the Southeast region, which consists of 12 states. Their focus is a little bit different. They focus more heavily on cybersecurity, engineering, robotics, literacy, and ACT testing. They also have a really neat STEM bus that they drive around that they can visit your various deaf schools and institutions. Right now, of course, because of COVID, we've paused the traveling of the STEM bus, but we're hoping to resume that in the fall. We've also been able to provide a lot of experiences to students digitally through that bus. We also have other special programs like the summer transfer program, which is new, that we're working on expanding. We also have Project Fast Forward, which is a dual credit course program for high school students who want to earn college credits. And we offer trainings and opportunities for educators to teach those courses. We also have STEM interpreter trainings, conference support and sponsors, VR and employer trainings that we offer. So that pretty much sums up what we can offer to you. So again, if you have any interest in working with us, especially regarding STEM education for students, teachers, interpreters, employers, or VR counselors, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. It might be good to do via Barb. I can give you the email for Barb, who takes care of all of that scheduling. And again, thank you for this opportunity. And I'm so thrilled that we've been able to support this conference series. I'm now looking forward to Aleisha's presentation today, and I can turn it over to whoever's next. And this is Jennifer. Thank you so much, Denise, for sharing those great opportunities with our schools. We're really looking forward to working with you. Before I introduce our main speaker, I want to give you all a quick reminder that we had Cogswell Macy introduced yesterday. We're going to be sending out more information for that program soon. So thank you all. Now I would like to introduce our speaker for today. And before we do that, I just want to give you an idea of what this looks like. We're going to have a presentation till about 3, and then we'll have a question and answer session. We're going to explain more how that will go logistically at that time. I'm thrilled to introduce Dr. Aleisha Allen. She is the Assistant Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion at NTID and RIT. She is responsible for overseeing diversity and inclusion efforts, giving counsel to the president and to other NTID administrators related to diversity and inclusion. She also is trying to build bridges and bridge the gap between the RIT and NTID communities. She will be presenting about culturally responsive education and meaning making when it comes to relationships. So welcome, Dr. Aleisha Allen.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to present to all of you. I'm absolutely thrilled at this honor. So thank you so much, CEASD. I really appreciate it. There are a few housekeeping things before we get started. To give you a little bit of information about my background, which is related to clinical psychology, I went to Gallaudet and graduated with my PhD a couple of years ago with, again, my PhD in clinical psych. Sometimes you can't separate the psych from education. And so I'm just wanting to put that out there that my background isn't foundationally in education, though I do now have a lot of experience. And there are a lot of experiences that have paralleled the work that I do between both. And my perspective comes from, again, a therapeutic background, a clinical psych background. However, there are a lot of applications that I can take and see in at higher ed, and that's what I do. So I'm so excited to share some of those parallels that I've seen over the years, some of my work with you. And historically, I've included or I've worked with underserved populations in stronger urban areas such as Philadelphia. And PSD as well, Pennsylvania School for the Deaf is a school that I've had a strong relationship with for several years as well. And I've also done some work with MKSD, which is the New Jersey School for the Deaf. It's escaping me this very moment, but it is MKSD. I do at least remember the acronym. And I did some work for them for about a year, providing support to students with multiple disabilities or additional social or emotional challenges. And so I've definitely had a lot of varying experiences working with education through different means. So I won't go on too much about that. I will go ahead now and share my screen. I'm working with different screens here. So if you just give me one moment, I'll get my setup all worked out and we'll be all set. All right. I'm hoping everyone can see my screen. I can't see all of you. So, okay, thank you to whoever gave me a thumbs up. We're working. Great. So my PowerPoint is over here. Don't mind if my eyes divert a little bit. So before we get started, I am a big believer on relationships, and that relationships truly are key to all of the work that we do. Whether it's in my background, which is more of a social background, social work, case manager, psych, or also education. Relationships matter everywhere you are. I'm successful today, and I am where I am today because of my history with relationships and because of the relationships I've cultivated along the way. I mean, I think for a long time I might have felt like I knew what relationships were, and I just wanted to make sure that we had a common understanding because we all might have different ideas of what relationships are. So we'll use the chat, and I'll pull it up for myself so I can see the responses. We don't have to take too long on this, but just brainstorm some of your thoughts. What exactly is a relationship? Why are they important? And what are the different kinds of relationships? So just talk about them. What do you think? How do you feel about relationships? Are relationships all common? Are they all the same? Are they varied? What's involved? What are some components? Think about the different power dynamics, teacher, student, or the different dynamics in general. And as you see, it's fine which question you answer. It doesn't have to be in order, but just go ahead and throw some of your thoughts in the chat, and I'll try to catch a read. Oh, seeing lots here. Let me blow up my chat. Oh, yes, I'm seeing. Yes, yes, yes. I love all of this. These answers are great. Professional and personal, trust, open communication. Communication is key. Transparency, yes. Interaction between parties. So, two people, two groups, whatever it might be. Mutual respect, connectedness with others, building bridges between people. Both parties have to be invested. Absolutely. And I like the connectedness, connection or connectedness. I also like the idea of making connections, developing understanding and rapport. Absolutely. I think you all get it. And thank you so much for your participation. So, why is this important? So, we might have a connection, we need transparency, we need communication, but why is that important? Suppose a relationship is lacking those things, then what happens? Yes, I see safe space. Um, so why are relationships important? It is a tough one, right? It takes a little more thought. Sometimes we have a knowing in our head, sometimes we have a knowing in our heart, and we know why relationships are important, but down to the true meaning of it, I want you to really think about why are these important? What are they for? So I do see someone that says to work effectively and efficiently, both people need to be working together. Overall productivity, sure. Having support or giving support. And that's key right now, especially during this chaotic time that we're amid. And Jennifer said 7 months that you've been doing these bi-weekly online sessions, and things have really changed since the beginning of the pandemic. It's not just CEASD, but it's truly an impact on the entire world. And so relationships are key right now. And we're living in a different time. Things are shifting. We are socially distant from each other. We're not as connected. And so, yes, everything that you've all mentioned is of the utmost importance. Having positive growth, yes, definitely. I'm looking at the chat still. Healthier work environment, room for growth. I'm happy someone said health because pertaining to my very next slide, here we go. It's important to recognize that in all of the comments and all of the brainstorming that we did together about relationships, it's important to consider productivity and efficiency and all of that in the education system. That's a lot. We need to have empathy, we need to have mutual respect, We need to develop trust, have honest communication, compromise. But at the same time, while it's important to work together and have good working dynamics, we also have to respect everyone's individuality. We are all very different. And I cannot emphasize enough the importance of individuality, especially as it pertains to this particular presentation. So do keep that in mind. Good communication doesn't always mean we use the same language or same mode of communication, but rather, are you paying attention? Are we giving back non-manual markers or back channel feedback? Are we letting the person know that we're engaged and we're there with them and in the conversation? If a student is listening to a professor or staff member or an admin, what does that dynamic look like? Look at their faces. Their body language is so important. You see a lot in body language. It's not always just spoken or even signed language. And I would often ask students in my psych class, they would feel shocked when I would say, a dead person is also a communicator. And they thought I kind of meant dead as in, on the ground in a coffin. And that's not quite what I meant. But what I mean is just the act of sort of being dead in a conversation. If you're just sitting there inactive and passive, that's a form of communication, believe it or not. And so, um, and then not only that, but even though the person has passed, perhaps if we're really using that, they have communication on their in their body, right? Were they happy? Were they sad, etc. So we're always communicating, whether we know it or not, is the point. And also understanding, mutual understanding, having understanding, but also being understood and being heard. If there's some kind of failure that happens or a task that wasn't completed or you're one step closer to your goal but you haven't gotten there, it's important to have understanding and support along the way. And so if you notice your relationships, whether teacher to student, faculty to chair, admin to staff or faculty, whatever the dynamic might be, is if you sense some kind of control or some kind of personal desire to sort of micromanage, consider, are you considering all of these perspectives? Are you being as healthy as you can? Hostility, right? And these are some of, we've moved on to the unhealthy column. Control is one. Hostility, making spaces unsafe for individuals. You have to consider what safety is for people. Sometimes we say, or we call those acts microaggressions at times, where they happen over and over, and sometimes they can become hostile. And it's not always body language, but sometimes it's just the subtle messages or the unconscious messages that we're conveying to people that are hostile. Dishonesty, disrespect, of course, those are unhealthy habits in a relationship. Overdependence or dependence, intimidation, of course, or physical violence, absolutely. So healthy versus unhealthy. Now that you have an idea of what a healthy or unhealthy relationship might look like and some of the components, you can keep those in mind going forward. So perhaps you're sitting here saying, Alicia, okay, what's the point? We're talking about relationships. Why? Or is this what we're going to do for the next 1 hour? And I know that you know this already. You're administrators, you understand. There's a lot of literature out there about this, about how to have good and healthy relationships among all sorts of dynamics, all sorts of power dynamics, whether it be interpersonal or otherwise. And to also have a quality relationship, which is subjective. Quality to everyone is different. And you have to really define what quality is because it's very contingent on each individual. But the idea of having an overall general positive quality, oh my God, I'm sorry, having such a positive reaction and having such a positive relationship with people, when things come up, you can handle them better. And when there are conflicts, they can be handled. So again, it's not just education, but having quality relationships is important and makes an impact in every aspect of your life. So the point of having a quality relationship with respect to education, and I've seen it pretty often in various publications, but so for example, if there are students, if you really truly know your students, you know their name, you know a bit about them, not just subtle things, their name, their age, but instead you actually know a little bit about their family, a little bit about perhaps some of their struggles or successes, some of the turmoil that they might have gone through in their life, or some of the good times. If you truly know your students to that level, that's a quality relationship as opposed to a surface relationship. And really knowing them helps cultivate a better relationship, having an understanding of the student, not only like a connection, but also their culture. And, to me, I value my ability to connect with many individuals. And sometimes when it feels really difficult, I have to ask why. And it just might be some kind of difference that's going on. There might be some mental health challenges that someone's going through. And really, there are just a lot of different reasons in which connection might be difficult. And it's important to just consider what those might be, to stop and take a second to put yourself in the other person's shoes. Showing respect for culture is also very important. And I think in general, we get it, the idea of like respecting difference and respecting other cultures. But I don't think we have that conversation about respect enough, to be honest, especially when it comes to respecting people's cultures, or accepting support from those that are different than us. And I would encourage that dialogue as much as possible, especially as we talk about relationships. Sometimes we think we know, but have we sat down and thought about what it means to respect someone's culture? What is exactly involved and entailed in that? What does it look like to give respect, and what kind of respect? What does it look like to receive respect? And finally, affirming students' worthiness to receive the best education. I think that all students have a belief, I have a belief that all students, regardless where they come from, their race, their ethnicity, their background, if they're non binary, if they're part of the LGBTQIA community, whatever their background, whatever their experience or intersections, they deserve the best education, and they deserve to learn and to have information given to them in an accessible way. And that mentality goes a long way if we really understand that every student deserves the best education, and we work toward that goal of success for them. And not just students, but also administrators, faculty, and staff as well. Really, everyone. We're all part of the education process, and we all have a contribution towards students' success. So now, if you can, think about the very best relationship you have. I don't want to make any assumptions if you've got a partner or a spouse or someone close to you. It might not be that person that you have the absolute best relationship with. It might be, but it doesn't have to be. And just think about the best relationship ever. It might again be someone that you're close or intimate with, a brother or sister, a family member, a best friend, whatever it might be. And then think about your working relationships, your professional relationships. So think about those two as we go through the presentation, and just consider them in the back of your mind. You might be wondering, what works, what doesn't work? Why do I connect with this person, but not other people? Why are some relationships easier than others? We'll talk about that through the entire presentation. So I hope that you have this person in your mind and ready for application, because we'll get there soon. Okay. So I like to ensure that we're all on the same page, just that we're not working with different assumptions, and that we all are on a mutual understanding. So the population that we'll be talking about right now, the deaf and hard of hearing population, and of course, you're already familiar with the fact that we'll be talking about the deaf community, and why it's important to provide cultural responses. And the reason being is because a lot of our deaf and hard of hearing folks experience identity crises. And myself, even, for example, thinking about my labels over the years, am I deaf, am I hard of hearing? I do have some residual hearing, so there's times where I do identify with hard of hearing, and that's where my dissertation research focused. But I also am involved deeply with the deaf community and care very much about it. And so I've struggled with my identity. Where exactly do I fit? Or, sometimes I use a lot of resources in one setting, but I might not in another setting. And so the process of just sort of solidifying your identity and standing by who you are and your truth. And everyone goes through that in different ways. Common themes in this experience through exploration of deaf identity is social isolation, often feeling alone or like another. Discrimination, I really can't tell you how many times, and all of us have, I think, gotten to a point where we've experienced a lot of discrimination. Things like, well, you can't use the phone or make calls, so you can't work here, or some kind of excuse as to why it wouldn't work, or interpreters don't show up due to lack of access, which is my next point, or things happen where you don't have access because of something external, and that's pretty popular in our community, unfortunately, and is another component. In therapy, I have seen a lot of issues of abuse, various kinds of abuse, the entire gamut: physical, sexual, verbal, emotional, etc. And truly, it's mind boggling because all of us as a community, when we think about how we become so resilient and how we fight back and we keep standing and getting up, it would appear that the abuse hasn't impacted us to the point where it keeps us down, and that's resiliency. Sexuality or survivors of sexuality, next point, individuals often don't have access to adequate sex education, and there's a lot of misinformation or a lot of idealizing, romanticizing ideas, and some of the information is based on wrong ideas, some based on, again, misinformation, incorrect ideas. And it takes a while for an individual to sort of reset from that and bounce back from having lack of information. Advocating for accommodations. Here at RIT NTID, there are a lot of assumptions. The accommodations are just simply there, but the truth of the matter is students are actually responsible, and individuals, for requesting interpreters, requesting the services they need, and making sure that NTID knows the support that they need, especially depending on whatever services they might require. We want to make sure that they're provided in every area of their academic career. And so that is on the onus of the student. And sometimes parents take care of things for students until they get to college and they come here and realize they're on their own. And not just that, but also having real world experience. Being in an educational setting is different than being in other areas. And I sometimes still find myself thinking, what do I have to do for that? Or how does that work? And I sort of have to learn how to appropriately support their needs. And that's what I do. And independence. We always want to support that notion of independence among everyone, especially deaf and hard of hearing people. Now, you might be sitting here saying, right, right, right. I know that many of you know exactly what I'm talking about, but I just wanted to go over it. We can switch, Hannah.
And I don't think that we can talk about the challenges the deaf community faces without also considering the impact of COVID. And this is not only for students, but with faculty, staff, etc. We have seen such a huge increase in the stressors. People are worried about their job security. They're worried about having to use masks. Will I be able to lip read? There's so much stress that goes into that. People getting more anxious. Will I have to miss work again to quarantine because someone was exposed at school? Is my kid safe at school? All of those things. A lot of the women faculty at NTID also have been talking about how their research efforts in pursuing tenure have been somewhat inhibited because they're trying to balance work and home life, where also often male colleagues are able to pursue all of their research opportunities because their roles in their home might be different based on, different gender expectations that we all have. So the anxiety that's there for our colleagues and women faculty is really significant. There's fear, there's worry about yourself and your health, but also your loved ones. There's been such an astronomical amount of people who have passed away because of COVID. I think someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I saw the number of casualties from COVID was the same number as what Americans lost in World War I, World War II, and the Vietnam War. But there's just a lot of anxiety and concern around our health and our safety. And then on top of that, feeling more isolated. A lot of people are experiencing sleep problems. With physical distancing, there's a lot less social connection happening. And I'm sure that all of you have experienced the academic concerns that are facing educators and parents, worried that students are behind. And for BIPOC individuals, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, it's been even more challenging to make sure that academia is, or their academics and that school is accessible to them. So with all of that being said, in thinking about my presentation, what my heart is for minority groups, whether they're deaf, people who are going through COVID challenges, and the BIPOC communities out there, and thinking about how that burden and stress is compounded for them in this time of the pandemic, and what that means for their cultural identity and development. What does it mean for me as a Black woman in my community and culture to deal with this? How do I work in often an all-white environment to be able to be there? Do I decide to acculturate and decide to accommodate the majority culture, or do I draw a line somewhere? Where is that line? How do I dance that? And so in thinking about that, even if you haven't really considered some of the health disparities within the Black and POC communities, that's another thing that's just compounded. For me, this is my personal opinion, I feel like for Black folks, there's been so much recorded documentation of increased health conditions, et cetera, but I wonder if it's not an intrinsic health issue, but more of a lack of access to medical resources. There are so many stories of Black individuals getting COVID, going to the hospital and getting awful treatment, even people who are accomplished, deaf, Black doctors, etc. So when we think of the kind of things that are facing these communities, it's not always intrinsic lack or not having health, but it's that whole idea of not having access to a system that continually creates barriers for people to access resources. Not only this, minority groups are experiencing racism and systemic racism built into the fabric of society that we still see. And that is such a challenge for people who are in the BIPOC communities, not only in the deaf communities, to be able to navigate the world. We've already talked about this, but aside from barriers to the healthcare system, because of the history of systemic racism, there's also distrust of the medical community. Serena Williams talked about in giving birth to her daughter, she almost died if it wouldn't have been for her self-advocacy. And even, post-birth, having to fight for painkillers and say, hey, I have this pre-existing condition and everything else. She was responsible for her own advocacy. And this is a woman who's famous. This is Serena Williams. She's the greatest female tennis player of all time. And even she had to fight for herself to be able to get what she needed. So that's another thing that minority groups are facing. There's also a consistent pressure of acculturation. If you have a majority group, let's say that the majority group culture is white, if I am going in as a Black woman, how do I work in that environment without losing who I am? Is it something where I'm just going to, in a sense, clock in to the white majority culture for just my workday and then be able to feel relief once I get home and get to be myself again? How am I going to decide to do that? Not only that, there's also those other oppressions and barriers that come in through the day. Of course, English is the dominant language here, and sometimes English itself can be a tool of oppression. I've been amazed at some of the work that's being done at RIT right now in the study of English and seeing how it functions and seeing how the process of language development itself in English can sometimes be oppressive to other language minority groups. So in having heard me give all of the barriers that many of our students face, I want you to take a moment to think about this next slide. What you're going to see is you're going to see a diagram with a large circle in the middle, and I'd like you to put your name there. And then you're going to have satellite circles surrounding that. And think about who you are. What are the types of identities that you feel strongly connected to? This might be that I'm Asian American, or maybe you're female, maybe you're a mother or father. Are you an athlete? Are you an educator? A brother, a sister, a Christian, a Buddhist? Whatever it is that you feel that you would label yourself as or identify as. If you feel that 4 is not enough, absolutely add more to this mind map. I'm going to give you 1 or 2 minutes to think. Just think about what you would put in this diagram, or to sketch it out yourself. In the center, put your name, and then think about your identities for a couple minutes. All right. You can still continue thinking about your identities, and I would like to start by introducing mine. In this line of work, when I talk about relationships being so important, some level of disclosure and vulnerability is important to develop relationships. So I'm going to start this relationship by opening up. And before I do that, I want to acknowledge some of the comments that I may have overlooked in the chat. But someone had mentioned that validation, whether or not you agree with a person, validation is important. And I completely agree, 100%. People need to be and feel heard. Someone else talked about minority group oppression within a minority group. Makes me think of the concept of horizontal violence, and that is very true. Sometimes there are challenges within a minority community, but we all ultimately have to work together to make it through. I think that often people use that as a white supremacist tool by saying, you know, black on black crime is the real issue. But if we look at that, we have to really look at the causes, and that it's often because of systematic racism that happens if people aren't able to work in the larger society. So now to my identities. one thing that you can think of is that sometimes these circles are things that may change over time. It depends where you are in life. Until a few years ago, I would put down I'm a professional student, because I felt like my dissertation journey was going to take forever. I definitely took the scenic route to finish my PhD. But there are, for a lot of reasons, that it took me such a long time. But now for me, I put Dr. Allen. And I also feel like I have a little imposter syndrome now that I, in a sense, have made it. It's hard for me to believe that Dr. Allen is me, but I'm also really proud of that. I'm proud of that title. And even though I'm still getting used to it, when I hear someone introduce me as Dr. Allen, or see someone introduce me as Dr. Allen, I always kind of feel like I have to look around and be like, oh, who are we going to hear from today? And I have to really pump myself up and say, no, that's me. I worked for that. That's part of my identity now. I'm hard of hearing. I'm Black. I'm a female, cis female. I'm an academic, a daughter, and a mother. I love food. I am a foodie. You can throw anything at me and I will try it. I love food from other countries I haven't heard before. I'm just crazy about it. If you ever need someone to eat your food, call on me. I'm all for vegetarian food, vegan food. I'm still trying to get into. I'm trying more. I'm trying to try vegan stuff more. I like butter, so that's tough for me sometimes with the vegan food, but I'm trying. I'm here for it, and I am ready to appreciate whatever food you give me. But I am a meat eater and I do love my butter. So I will put that out there as a caveat for any vegans in the audience. But this is a summary of some of my identities. If you could maybe talk about some of the identities you put in your circle, there's no pressure to do that, but you can type some of the identities that you put down in the chat and you might find some things in common. So I'm going to monitor the chat really quickly to see what all of you came up with. Oh, before we do that, before I forget, if you want, again, no pressure, when you put out one of your circles, one of your identities, think about a time that you were really proud of that identity. I am proud of my Blackness because I get to continue the legacy and story of my aunts and uncles who experienced civil rights and the successes that came from those people. My family are strong churchgoers, and they were people who worked with Martin Luther King Jr., et cetera. And my grandma talks about all the time, Martin Luther King Jr. came to my church and I sang in the choir and I saw Martin Luther King Jr. And so there are many family members that I really look up to, and I'm proud of my heritage and the culture that was part of that civil rights movement that brought liberation. It might be one of those things that you do have pride in, but you still have some pain in. Many of us still don't feel safe in certain areas and are at the receiving end of police brutality, or in situations, that's not something for me that is I am proud of my heritage and identity, but it's also, tainted with some pain sometimes of what that looks like. It doesn't have to be that dramatic, your explanations, but think about a time, if there's a brave soul who wants to put out one of your identities, one of your circles, and talk about a time you were proud of that identity. But also think about maybe an identity where there is a painful memory attached. If there are any of these questions that people would like to respond to, please do. Someone said, LOL, I'm with you. Was that related to the food situation, I'm guessing? Okay, good. Shannon said yes. I'm saying mother as an identity. I think about everything that I've done, and I am so proud to become a mom, but I'm also so honored to have a child who teaches me so much. Mother-daughter relationship, deaf and Italian. Love it. Anyone else? Again, no pressure. One thing to keep in mind is that some people feel like they only have a few identities, like, oh, I don't have that many. And that's all right. It's not a bad thing, but I think that some people who don't have many things that come to mind, they may be in an environment where they're supported, and those different identities aren't pointed out. So some people perceive that as someone who might be privileged, who doesn't have to think about it, but it's not always necessarily an environment where you have automatic privilege. It could also be because you're in a supportive environment, well, where some of your identities haven't had to be discriminated against or challenged. I'm seeing other ones. I'm seeing Mother, Catholic, Norwegian. I'm trying to remember the sign for Norwegian. Forgive me if I'm wrong. Native American. And also for Native American, I've seen different signs. So always, it's important, something that I've learned for myself is that Native American is not a monolith. People like to be identified as their clan. Some prefer Indigenous as a group label, some prefer Native American. So it's the same thing with signing. I think it's always important to ask the preference that people have. Proud sister of brother who has TBI, a traumatic brain injury. Is that correct? TBI? So I'm assuming that's what that means. Traumatic brain injury? Yes. Okay. I experienced discrimination at the age of 6 for the first time. In this line of work, people are often shocked at the experiences of individuals who have experienced oppression or discrimination at a young age. And it is sad, yes, but it's also very common. I think that often there are identities that sometimes people get sick of because they're often stereotyped. I know that for me, as a Black person, I'm often animated, and people often then would stereotype me maybe as an angry Black woman. And that might not be true, especially with me signing. I might be really excited about something. And it doesn't usually happen in environments when I'm with other Black folks. There are also so many different situations that happen even within cultures themselves. One thing to think about too is we often think of Latino cultures, but often there are Afro-Latinos there. And so they might look like me, but their culture is going to be really different. In visiting the Dominican Republic, we had the same complexion, but they had a really strong Latino identity or Latina identity. And so even that, when we think of cultures, even Black folks who are here might not be identified as African American or as Black, but might identify as a Jamaican or the country of their origin. So it's always important not to make too many assumptions. Go ahead and switch.
Thank you all so much for your participation in the chat. I also recognized with this topic, and again, this is my opinion, But I wish there was more discussion in educational settings, particularly when kids are young, being open about the idea of intersectionality. My daughter right now is 4, and occasionally we have sort of like the talk. And not all Black individuals experience this, but there are a lot who have the talk with their children, son, daughter, whatever they might be. And, most of the time you hear the talk, we think it's sex related. But for me, it's not. For me as a Black woman, it's about telling my daughter that she's valuable, that she's worthy, that she is empowered, that she matters as a little Black girl, and that sometimes things won't be safe for her. And that sometimes if you have encounters with police, you have to do this, this, and this to seem de escalated. And sometimes these people or institutions might not support you, but we've worked really hard and come a long way, right? So it's this historical context and helping her understand her value. It can't just be we have the talk about sex and that's it. Our talks look a little different and there's a real call for them. So, especially now, just again in these crazy times, I'm seeing stories about what happened in Atlanta with the man who was in a spa and I think he killed 8 Asian women. That just happened. This is a recent occurrence. And it raises the idea of intersectionality and the need to understand that. And this, just so you know, is the sign that I use for intersectionality. I think that there are a few, but this is what I use. And intersectionality is essentially a concept of identity. If you remember going back to that diagram with the circles, thinking about who you are, some of you had strong identities that were very important and resonated with you, but they all make up who you are, whether you felt strongly resonated or not. Regarding intersectionality, think about all the bubbles that you filled in. Often they are oppressive or stereotyped. When you think about, for example, can white people talk about intersectionality? Well, yes, white women experience oppression, Jewish individuals have experienced oppression, and they are often labeled as oppressed groups. But when we talk about oppressed groups, we tend to focus on one oppressed group and not all of them, or we're not looking at what's lacking or the discrimination. Sometimes we're ignoring certain factors or certain impacts that hit people and they're unable to get what they need. And so the point is that you can't look at one without looking at all of them. All intersecting identities have importance. And I've got a really cool comic that I love to share with students and colleagues and friends to explain the importance of intersectionality and to give sort of a visual narrative. So that's what I'll share with you next. Alrighty. Intersectionality, a fun guide. I hope you enjoyed that. It was, the point is just to express the concept of intersectionality and that we all have different identities and that we can't look at one without the other. Students, people, faculty, staff, etc., come to a place, an educational setting, and they have multiple identities. And some might be oppressive in various ways because of societal impressions and expectations. And when we consider policies, regulation, new ideas, concepts, protocols, etc., to make a space more safe and inclusive, we have to think about these things. I'm looking at the time and I'm seeing it's running out. So I have a few more things I'd like to touch on. So I'll go a little bit quickly. Again, coming from a psych background, I wanted to include something on multicultural competency. This is a concept that comes up pretty frequently in my field. And so basically it involves three key components. The first being awareness. So developing an awareness of one's own cultural values and biases, understanding what you hold, what you think, what you like, what you don't like, and just in general being aware of those values and biases. The second stage or component would be knowledge, right? Learning, ever learning, never saying no to information, learning and understanding what makes people who they are, especially individually, and what you do and do not like about a person. It's important, it's really key to give yourself permission to change your mind. You might have been grown up with a certain background and taught certain things and have certain values, but the more you go through the knowledge process and learn about people, the more you can open up your mind and change your opinions and views. And then the last component would be skills. So developing a set of culturally appropriate interpersonal skills, having more cultural competency and expertise and understanding the components of that. Again, learning as much as you can, figuring out yourself, understanding where you're coming from, your customs, beliefs, and foundations, and how those interact with people that you meet anew. And all of that, if you consider all of these awareness, knowledge, and skills, these components, think about where are you in the journey and can you continue to do your job in the way that it needs to be done. And so thinking about cultural competency, some people might think it's a task that once you're done, but truly it's an ever learning, ever growing area where you can always be trained and always know new things and learn new things because everyone is so different. It's not just sort of, I've got this one Black friend, or I know this because of that one experience, but rather you moving beyond sort of where everyone else is on the stagnant level and truly becoming multiculturally competent. I also strongly encourage you, all the way from administrators to students, to practice something we call cultural humility and responsiveness. And so that's a step beyond multicultural competency. Once you have those competencies, cultural humility essentially means that you're able to integrate those into your daily being. And so that you become an individual who is constantly aware, constantly considerate, thinking about my life, my customs, beliefs, ideas, my foundation, but how it interacts with other people, especially of different cultures, beliefs, faiths, thoughts, and ideas. We might not agree, but can we respect each other and can we integrate and work together and engage? And if yes, then that's cultural humility. And this process, you always want to be thinking about the other person, their perspective. Think about yourself as well, but in terms of how it relates to the other person's process, because you're hoping to understand the other person and their culture better. And that's the point of cultural humility. And then change your behaviors in accordance to that. So to be effective, to have cultural humility, and to practice it, you have to have an accurate assessment of yourself. You have to be very raw and very honest with yourself and indicate where you're not comfortable. And think about why you don't like things and consider and be introspective. Think about your upbringing, your parents, your experience. Does that help or hinder? Does it impact you and your work and your ability to do something, right? It's just always something that you have to keep in mind. And you can't be culturally humble without being authentic. I am moving a little fast. I apologize for the speed, bear with me. But next we're moving on to the multicultural orientation framework, aka MCO. So this is a type of theoretical framework or philosophy that will essentially help you progress with this idea of cultural humility. And so one of my this I love this framework because in the psych world, social work, clinical psych, etc., we have what's called orientation, which means a person who has a particular expertise in a certain type of therapy, like CBT or humanistic approach, or whatever it might be, so that you can orient yourself to the client and then have an effective working relationship. If you're not in psych, or you don't have that kind of a background, you're an educator, you absolutely still can include this, whether you are familiar with it or not. It absolutely can be practiced by all, because the point is, at the end of the day, is to just match your consumer, essentially. So we've got this multicultural orientation framework. It includes worldviews, values, and beliefs of the client. Again, I used client because I'm coming from this therapeutic framework or background, but it could be your boss, it could be administrator, it could be a supervisor. The beliefs of the client and the therapist, or insert parties here, interact and influence one another to co-create an experience that promotes healing. How does that happen? Good or bad, indifferent, uncomfortable, etc. How does that engagement take place? What does it look like? This practice in cultural humility, the engagement, the point of it at the end of the day is for healing, for mutual understanding. You don't necessarily have to agree, but you have to be respectful, mutually respectful to each other. And again, you can't use this without already having some underpinnings or foundation of cultural competency. And so this really is layered, and there are a lot of moving pieces. So cultural humility, that's key. That's basically the foundation for using this framework. But there are three pillars that are involved in the framework. First, a way of being, which is having cultural humility, cultural opportunities, so identifying and responding to therapeutic cultural markers and sessions, or again, take this and make it to the parties that it applies to. But it's basically how you respond. There are cultural opportunities to learn and to give and to support. And so how do you respond to those? If someone comes to you they make you feel uncomfortable, how do you respond to that? What place are you coming from in response to what they've done that's made you feel uncomfortable? How can you heal from that? And a way of understanding the self in these moments, cultural comfort. Sometimes we are uncomfortable, but it's important to think about the discomfort. Why am I anxious? Why am I uncomfortable? Why don't I feel good? And there's a wide range of different responses, and it all depends on your cultural comfort, and again, comfort, which again is impacted by what we're talking about and will impact your relationships. And you have to understand your cultural comfort in order to understand, to be able to respond appropriately. You have to know what makes you feel comfortable and what doesn't. Sometimes people overlook things and maybe feel triggered later or identify it later, but it's important in the moment to know what's going on for you, what's coming up. One point I'll synthesize here, because again, I'm moving a little quickly, but one part of cultural humility is what we call pre-work. So it's important to keep in mind that anytime you meet new people, engage with new ideas or thoughts or policies are changing, or you're in a space where things are happening, it's really important to consider, do you have a good understanding and reflection of yourself? Do you know who you are and how you relate to whatever it is you're talking about? For example, what religion, does your religion have an impact, your sexuality, your socioeconomic status? How do all of these factors impact the decisions that you make on a daily basis, particularly with respect to your job in the education setting? And so, you might think something's not a good idea, but why? Is it based on a religious perspective or, ideology? Or do you have a certain dislike or distaste for a certain community? If so, why? It's just really important to consider that your decisions always have sort of reasons and motives behind them, and you have to just consider what they are. You might have to put aside some biases or stereotypes and focus on a resolution, or focus on inclusion, or focus on equity. And what does that look like? And how can you respond to be able to do that, as opposed to letting all of your stuff come up and inhibit progress? If you don't understand or you need more information in a situation, how comfortable are you at being assertive and asking more about that? Remember, I mentioned earlier that I love food. I'm a foodie. And that's just one easy way to learn about other cultures and other countries is to go to different areas, different festivals, like the Puerto Rican festival, for example, and try food there. And, are you comfortable if this were you to go and say, what is that? And tell me more about that. And I'd like to try it. And, think about how much you can learn just from food and the idea of opening up and expanding your horizons and trying different things. And so my taste bud and my tummy are happy and I've learned a lot. And so there's really so many ways to interact. It doesn't have to be a very serious, strict sit down with someone or go to a seminar or webinar. These are really informal, laid back ways to learn about people and how to associate better. So the point essentially that I'm trying to make, end of the day, is growth. Growth, it never stops. We're always growing and ever changing. And if you want to be engaged in this work, you'll continue to grow until the day you die. And, think about people all over the world, customs, religions, cultures. It's so impossible for us to understand every nuance and every consideration and every factor. And it certainly won't happen overnight what we do learn, but we can practice and we can care. And it's about making a commitment to learn about those things. It will be uncomfortable. Growth is uncomfortable. I'm the AVP for diversity and inclusion, and I'm still uncomfortable at times in this space. And I have to recognize and own what's mine, and sometimes do a little bit more soul digging or soul searching to understand what's coming up for me. So it still happens. It's normal. It's part of growth, transformation, or pain leads to transformation and leads to growth. And so at the end of the day, if our goal is to learn, we will be doing that. I've already mentioned this a little bit, but of course, to be engaged and involved in this space, it requires empathy. Again, we all want to be understood. I mean, that's just the human experience. We don't always have a solution to the problem, and you don't have to, but sometimes people just want to be heard and understood and listened to. When you do this kind of work, it's utterly important to put the notion of self aside. You have to consider the other person, sort of put yourself in their shoes, if you will. Think about their problem and their perspective and their considerations as opposed to yours, because that's cultural humility and having appropriate cultural responses. If issues come up and there are strong feelings about something or you're upset, it will impact your ability to be culturally responsive. It's also sometimes hard too because people might minimize things at times. Um, we need to have the ability to communicate the understanding and feelings without judgment. So if you're overwhelmed and you're trying to tell someone that, it's really important that they're listening. Language like, okay, I'm hearing you're overwhelmed. I'm hearing you've got a lot of work, and I'm hearing you've got some concerns. Perhaps you can't pass this class or get this task done or whatever it is. And then that's it. And there's no solution. Sometimes even just being heard validates their experience. Again, if you can't, even if you are unable to provide a solution, sometimes support is all someone needs. And then empathy is critical for change and growth. It's an absolutely necessary component. Sometimes these problems arise and become worse because there's no empathy. And it's, again, not about you, it's about the other person. And so you literally have to move your judgments, biases, and thoughts aside and do the best to try to understand that person and where they're coming from in that moment, in that time. So again, going back to your diagrams, thinking about how you want to be culturally competent and culturally responsive, here are a few ways to do so. Be mindful of the social identities that students, admin, etc. might have. Some might be painful, some might be prideful, but everyone's got a lot of intersecting identities, and it's really important to consider them, and the fact that they're all unique. Consider how your values and worldview may influence your client or insert person X's perception of you, and the potential impacts on the rapport. So again, thinking about what how you might have an impact. If you have a deaf blind student in the room, for example, offer one-on-one instruction, offer mentoring, offer some kind of extra support, and set those standards before. And just think about all the little things that might be able to make that student feel good, feel better, feel culturally respected and understood. And I'm guilty myself. I have to admit that sometimes we forget things, sometimes things slip our mind. But what's most important is, again, this is a cultural opportunity to acknowledge what might have not been there, acknowledge a gap, and to ask questions so that next time you're more prepared and you can advocate for that student or person X. It's okay to apologize and to be sorry, but if nothing changes, then that doesn't help the situation. So, consider culture every day in places of opportunity and growth. Again, just continued acknowledge what's happening in the world outside of the education setting. Sometimes we feel siloed off. Think about what's the impact of COVID on your students? What's the impact on COVID with people that we work with? Some people, have a visual disability, and that might be more easily identified. So ask how you can support them. Just don't act like you're not seeing it. Don't act like it's not there. Most people, again, just want to be recognized and acknowledged as the human that they are. Don't make assumptions. I think I've already spoke to that enough, but that's definitely one area you want to avoid is assumptions. Oh, we're almost done. Okay, great. So my last slide here, some barriers to being a culturally responsive educator. One is fear. Fear is very inhibiting. You might not know what to do. You might be nervous about your reaction or behavior, and maybe you just take an exodus. Perhaps you have an anxiety of lack of preparedness for emotionally charged conversations. You might not be ready for the conversation. You might not be in the space or have the skills to be able to sort of handle that to the quality you'd like. But again, if you can embrace being uncomfortable and embrace this experience as a growth opportunity, go in knowing that, and whatever you come out with will be for the better because you'll have learned something from it if you can go in with that mindset. And it's normal. There's some areas I don't have a lot of skill or a wealth of knowledge in certain areas, and just be honest with yourself about that. It's okay. Sometimes we, have feelings of inadequacy or politeness for protocol. And so again, try to normalize, right? People are all different and unique, and we can accept everything about everyone. We don't have to ignore things. We don't have to just acknowledge people again. Be honest, be authentic, and be humble. Like for example, the famous motto, I don't see color, but it's okay to acknowledge me. I am Black. Please don't ignore that fact. The color of my skin impacts many areas of my life, my daily life, and sometimes I'm very proud of it. And sometimes it's painful, but never do I want to not be seen. So please always acknowledge and recognize individuals' identities. If you learn nothing from this, please remember this very last line, that cultural humility is being comfortable admitting what we don't know. That's all it is. Going in, embracing the uncomfortable, acknowledging it and owning it. You might come in clueless. That's okay. A simple question is tell me more. And so that's the goal. If you have cultural humility, your relationships in terms of productivity, in terms of quality, your relationships at home, your relationships at work with your students, with your colleagues, etc., it will just skyrocket. They will be exponentially better. They won't be perfect. Nothing is perfect, but you will grow and you will come together and you will understand each other better. So thank you so much. I know that I rushed through at the end, but thank you so much, CEASD, for allowing me the opportunity to present. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to take advantage now of the time that we have left, or if you'd like to contact me for any reason, please do feel free to contact me at ntiddiversity@rit.edu. And I'll get your email and I will be able to respond upon time. If you're interested in checking out our website, please do. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. You can see our handles right there. The website's right there. You should be able to just click and see what we're all about if you're interested. So again, thank you so much, CEASD, and really appreciate all of your attention today. It was a lot of information. Sit back and just take it in for a minute, but I'm here for questions.
This is Jennifer. Please stay on screen, Aleisha. And Aleisha saying, give me a second. I'm just going to stop screen sharing. So Jennifer speaking, such a wonderful presentation, so many takeaways and things for us to think about. I think as administrators, many of us are guilty of thinking of solutions and trying to fix the problem instead of going back to basics in relationships and just being heard.
Right.
It's 2:45. I'm sure we do have many questions that we would like to take the opportunity to ask you. Let's go ahead and do 2 or 3 questions, and then we will have the NTID promo video at the end before we close. How we're going to proceed with questions, whoever wants to ask a question, please actually turn on your video, ask your question. If there are multiple people coming up, that's okay, I'll moderate. And let's maybe do questions until about 2:55, and then we'll go to the video. I do want to let you know that this presentation has been recorded and shared and will be shared later. If there were maybe some slides that you wanted to look at again, that will be shared out to you. Who would like to ask the first question?
And all are welcome. Thank you so much for those that are already putting things in the chat. Again, truly, this has been an honor to present this week with you all, so thank you.
So if you do want to ask a question, turn on your video, please. You'll pop up and you can sign your question. You also could type in the chat if you prefer.
Oh, maybe I answered all the questions already in the presentation. No one needs to know anymore.
I'm sure.
No, that's okay. I recognize also that it's difficult to have this conversation because we don't talk about it often, especially on the higher levels. It's a bit of a newer concept. People are still processing and trying to understand sort of what we mean by this. Even things that are more subtle and more foundational are kind of, it just takes a while, and that's okay. I do see someone has a question.
Hello, this is Matt. It's really more of a comment than a question. Your presentation really just made everyone feel at ease. At least for me, it was so easy to watch and really a good opportunity for me to examine some of my own identities. I know that I'm not perfect. I know that your presentation may cause some discomfort for some people, but I really felt like it was very natural and easy to watch. I might actually be reaching out to you about a conference in Indianapolis, Indiana, because I'm on the board of, I'm on a conference board that I would like to invite you to.
Yes, please do contact me, and thank you so much for your feedback, Aleisha saying.
Jennifer is asking, does anyone else have a question or comment?
We do see one in the chat, sure.
Jennifer, do you want to sign or type? Okay. Yes, we can see you.
Oh, I think I've met you before.
Yes, I think we met somewhere.
Oh, great. Well, it's so nice to see you again.
CRT has many different frameworks now. It's a very popular thing to use in the classroom. We also have another big topic coming in. There's a book coming out soon talking about which books we should be using in our curriculum. Would you encourage teachers to talk about certain narratives that aren't maybe healthy in certain parts of our curriculum that would be worth getting rid of and things that we could replace?
This is Aleisha. I'm a big believer in having all of the information there so that you can understand why or why not you might have something, right? The college environment, for example, often might not be so great, and other areas are. And if we're talking about curriculum, for example, let's just talk about why. Why is it good? Why is it not? And there's pros and cons. So if you just get rid of the negative, for example, and focus only on the positive, then there's really no historical context. There's no understanding on why the problem exists in the first place. So someone might come in and say something like, I treat everyone equally and I get along with everyone, and that's fine, right? But then someone might interrupt and say, but that's not the case here in this situation, or this is not the case in this area. And people are sometimes shocked to hear. I'll give you an example. Let me start again. So I have a friend from California. It was a few years ago. And California, this person in California, their education was very open-minded, very perhaps liberal, if you will, very diverse, inclusive, etc. And so this person came to RIT and we were chatting, and they heard all these stories and they felt shocked, like, what? That's ridiculous. How does that happen? And they were aghast to know what was happening, because their area was very diverse, their area was very inclusive, their area had very um, affirmative language and positive language, and there was not even a thought that things could be different or that oppression does happen, because this person's sort of sheltered in that way. Even though it might seem good, what's important is to include everything on the table, have a discussion about why things are appropriate, why they're not appropriate. And the sticky problem that we have is that, some people might have some bias that are integrated into the reasons for why they are justifying certain things. So it's really important to be intentional and to understand that what people's intentions are. People might not simply understand why we do or do not do certain things. And so, bringing something to the table, it's important to consider the intentions. What's the point? Why was that done? And so, even in my work, I've only been in this role about 7 or 8 months, and there's already been a few incidences from faculty and students, in complaints about the curriculum being racist and rooted in white supremacist values. And so, if we want to have a look at this and a dialogue about their curriculum, why not? We have to talk about our history. We have to talk about what's working, what's not working. And I think all components are crucial to the conversation. We have to be really careful with what we keep and what we get rid of.
Looks like it's 2:54, so I'm so sorry for anyone else who has questions, but we do need to wrap up. If you have other questions, you can of course reach out to Aleisha. Thank you so much for being here and trying to summarize such a complex and important topic in a mere hour. We are now going to be showing an NTID promo video as a thank you to NTID for sponsoring this conference, and then we're going to wrap up.
Hi, my name is Gary Beam. I'm the Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs over at RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, NTID.
Thank you again for attending.